Good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for making it to the Glacier Deep Dive session. My name is Henry Zhang. I'm a product manager of Amazon Glacier. I'm also the guy standing between you and the replay party. So I'm going to make this short and sweet. And I appreciate you coming here, and today I want to tell you how Amazon Glacier can make your life simpler for data archival. A couple weeks ago, we celebrated the 3rd birthday of Amazon Glacier. It's been a wonderful product, it's been a great journey. Over those 3 years, we've seen tremendous amount of growth in customers using us for data archival. We started off having a lot of customers backing up their personal computers onto Glacier because we were low cost, we were highly durable. Then over the last 2 years, we've seen tremendous growth in the enterprise space, where customers from media, entertainment, healthcare, financial services, all these regulatory industries starting to adopt Glacier. We're very excited to see that, and I just want to start with a couple of customers that you may already know. So for those musicians in the house who have SoundCloud using Amazon Glacier, what they do is they provide a music sharing and collaboration platform. If you like to play guitar, you can record your licks and you can upload it in high-resolution format. Then they provide a way to generate low-resolution proxies that you can share, your friends can comment, and eventually they archive all the high-resolution content in Glacier. They store multiple petabytes of data in Glacier, and they plan to store that indefinitely. Similarly, in the video media space, Sony Media Cloud C is a platform where creative professionals can create videos, can share. It also generates low-resolution proxies that you can stream on your phones. And then they do something very similar to SoundCloud. All the original captures, the high-resolution content goes to Glacier indefinitely. Last but not least, since I live in Washington State, in King County, we're very proud that the King County is has replaced their tape solutions with Glacier. What they did is they had multiple tape libraries across 17 of their branch offices. And over the last year or so, they replaced all of that tape infrastructure with Glacier. They were able to save at least $1 million in the first year. And what is more important is that during this transition, they have been able to achieve compliance that met or exceeded the standards that they required to run their business. We're super excited about that. So across all of these use cases, what we have seen is there's been an explosion of code data in the last couple of years. I know a couple years ago, everyone was talking about big data. I think what has really transpired is that big data has really turned into the data lake, the archival process that really is required to retain all the data as long as I can. Earlier, we've had customers who decided to delete data because for cost reasons, for all types of other reasons. Now we see a trend where customers want to retain all of that just in case they need to pull it out for some additional analysis. We saw a lot of customers in ad tech industry. For example, they now store all of their clickstream information, all the pixels, for a very long time, just in case there's a new analytics platform that they can use to derive insight. So across multiple industries, we have seen media assets, 4K, 8K, ultra high density content that needs to be archived because they are generated one time but can be reused later to produce a director's cut or a Christmas special edition for your favorite DVD. In the medical space, we have genomics. I think the number I got was 700 gigabytes for you to do a 20-layer of base sequencing. And that number is increasing because we're getting better in the technology. And we have PACS images for X-rays, for MRIs. Those need to be retained for multiple years. And those customers found that Glacier is a very suitable use case for that. And last but not least, in financial services, there are 4,000 broker-dealers in the US, and they all are required to retain all of their communication, investor communication, their transaction records and log information up to 6 years. This is a rule called SEC 17A-4. So they found Glacier to be a suitable candidate for this type of long-term archival as well. What customers really like about Glacier is a lot of those come from a tape background. Actually, I'll do a quick raise of hand. How many of you use tape today for data archival? Okay, we've got a couple gentlemen over here, okay. And how many of you have done or is planning to do a tape refresh or a library expansion in the next 12 to 18 months? Okay, there's a gentleman over here. So what customers told us is they've been using tape for large volume, like petabyte scale data archival. There's always this churn for every couple of years. I need to do a refresh from LTO 5. Now it's from LTO 5 to LTO 7, and then periodically I have to buy libraries. I have to take down my online library. I have to put those new ones in. I have to reconfigure that. There's a lot of churn going on because they also have to do this. There's this humming noise in the background, which is this constant tape migration. It keeps rolling and rolling and rolling. And what we found is the customer that had the most amount of pain were these enterprise customers who are not infrastructure companies for storage or data management. They are the largest studios in Hollywood. They are some of the largest banks in the world. They're some of the largest healthcare providers that you may be customers of. Their strengths are not managing tapes. Their strengths are building new applications, new value chains for their customers, be it media, OTT, services for your phone, be it connected devices for better healthcare and remote diagnosis and all that. All of that points to the fact that, hey, there's something we can help customers simplify their data archival process with Glacier. So a couple of benefits customers really enjoy is, number one, with Glacier, you no longer need to buy any tape libraries. There's no CapEx investment, and you turn that into an OpEx investment. What that really means is now you have more cash flow in the beginning. Think about the couple of $1 million that you had to use to buy a next set of tape libraries or to do refresh. Now you can take that investment and build new, fancy, shiny applications. We all love shiny applications because that's what the technology and industries are evolving into. And the second thing is, with Glacier, you only pay as you go. I'm happy to inform you that 2 weeks ago, we dropped Glacier price by up to 30% in some of our largest regions. And we'll continue to do that and offer our cost reduction in the form of lower price to you as we continue our business. The third benefit customers really like is they no longer need to do any type of tape migration. This humming noise is gone. And last but not least, customers with very strict compliance or regulatory requirements can now use a number of regions of AWS where Glacier is present. For example, we have German customers who have strict rules of you cannot take business data outside of Germany. All the data centers have to be there. We just opened up the Frankfurt region with Glacier deployed, so we're seeing good growth over there. To summarize, customers really enjoy that Glacier is a low-cost archival storage platform that is very suitable or designed for long-term retention. I already mentioned the price point. It's 0.7 cents per gigabyte per month to start using Glacier. So that means to archive 1 terabyte of data for a year, now it costs $70. I happened to talk to I won't name names, but a healthcare provider who had a booth close to the AWS booth. They actually run a fully managed healthcare platform, and they charge $22,000 per terabyte per year. So there's a lot of room we can improve to make customers' lives easier, to drive down that cost and add more value. So Glacier is designed for infrequent access, so customers can take data back after 3 to 5 hours. So a lot of customers ask me why this is the case, and because this is a deep dive session, I just want to share a couple of things. So the 3 to 5 hour data retrieval really is a key element because we are able to turn a synchronous process of data retrieval into an asynchronous model. With that in hand, we have a lot more flexibility to choose a media that we use to store your data, and also to further drive down cost. Being able to extend that into an async model is tremendous, and we will continue to do that so that we can give you the lowest cost that we can. As I already mentioned, financial services customers, medical PACS images, and high-resolution media assets are some of our top customer favorites. We also talk to customers, and one of the other things that they really enjoy is the high durability of Glacier. Across AWS storage platform, we have S3, we have S3 infrequent access now, and we have Glacier. All these three products provide very high durability, which we express in a number of nines. So it's all 11 numbers of nines. What we typically tell customers is this means that the chance of losing one object in 1 year is if you have 100 billion objects, the chance of losing object is 1 per year. What we found is that didn't really resonate well with customers because a lot of the tape customers tend to think in terms of number of copies. So we did a little exercise, a thought exercise. Again, because this is deep dive, I'm going to share a little more detail. We talked to several large studios in Disney who are probably the most paranoid engineers, architects, and solution providers in terms of data durability. They archive pre-release content, very high resolution, and they cannot afford to lose that. What they call is those are the crown jewels of the studios. So we shared with them how we modeled this 11 nines of durability. We used a Markov chain model, and we simulated device failures. We simulated the percentages of network failure. We simulated server failures. We simulated a single AZ, availability zone failure. Then we also simulated a regional failure. And then that's how we came up with 11 nines of durability for Glacier. So we encouraged them to do a similar exercise, and we share some math. And what they told us is, with 2 copies of tape stored on a single site, they estimate the durability to be 4 nines. And with 2 copies of tape stored across 20 kilometers apart in 2 buildings, their estimate is 5 nines. So that was an aha moment. What they realized is, the 11 nines really means that with Glacier, not only do you get a low cost, you also get 7 orders of magnitude better durability than what they used to do, 2 copies of tape. So customer found that really helpful. So for those of you who might be new to Glacier, I just want to quickly cover how do you get started with Glacier. First of all, you'll set up an account with AWS. This is where you can configure your users. You can view your billing and usage, and you can also configure security, which is very important for storing your data. After that, you can start using Glacier by creating vaults, which are really our containers for storing Glacier archives. You can create up to 1,000 vaults in a single account. You can always expand that by building multiple accounts. And then within a vault, you can store as many archives as you want. A couple of things to remember. First of all is an archive is a collection of bytes, really. You can store a single file as an archive. You can store a picture. You can store a movie. But you can also bunch together a set of logs, zip them together, and store that as a single archive. Lots of options over there. There's a 40 terabyte max size per archive. You can store any number of archives. The other thing to mention here is Glacier archives are write once. So this is more relevant for the folks in the room who have to deal with compliance workloads and all that. The immutable nature of this of Glacier is very beneficial to a lot of customers who use us to store compliance information. Last but not least, I want to spend a couple minutes on the inventory. So I'm sure many of you have used S3. So Glacier is a little different than S3 in that we do not provide a real-time listing function, a real-time index. With S3, you can put an object. The name of the file becomes, the key. You can read that back. You can confirm that it's been written. With Glacier, again, this is similar to the 3 to 5 hour retrieval latency. We provide a code index so that we can further drive down the cost for your storage. And a lot of customers find this useful because once they upload an archive, we will provide you a archive ID. We throw out the file name. And then they typically build a local index for the file name to the Glacier archive ID mapping. Sometimes they don't do this in a highly durable fashion, so they may lose it. This is when the inventory becomes very helpful. You can download the inventory, and then you can reconcile with your local copy of this index. So there are several ways you can use Glacier. It really depends on whether you're a developer, whether you already have S3 in your projects, or you just prefer to use our storage products in a more transparent way. So I'll cover each of those, starting with the API access. As the same with any AWS services, Glacier provides full API access to all the controls. So it's very flexible for you to build applications. There are two things customers typically focus on because we're a cold storage platform. Uploading data and retrieving data are the two primary operations. So to upload data, first of all, you'll create a vault, as I already mentioned. For example, when you create a vault called the films. And then before you upload data, a couple of the tips we share is, number one, please configure security on the vault. Especially this is long-term data. You want to specify which of your users can access this, who can write, who can read the data, and who can or cannot delete data. The last one is typically very important because the thing about this is, you store this data for a very long time. It's cold. You don't go look at it very often. So you really want to make sure the security controls are tight on this container. And then you can use our APIs to upload the data. So after you upload the data, as I mentioned, we pass you back an archive ID, which some other products on the market call it a content address. So the tip here is this content address is unique within a region that uniquely identifies your piece of archive. So customers would typically store this archive ID in their local indexing system. They either have a mapping between the file that was uploaded to this archive ID, or they store additional metadata information. For example, they will do a media customers. They will do a low-resolution proxy for their asset. They store it alongside this file name and archive ID, so they can look it up afterwards. When you retrieve data, you will start by initiating a job and tell us which archive ID, which archive you want to retrieve. Then you basically wait for 3 to 5 hours, and then there's a way to configure notification so that once this retrieval is ready, as in you can download your archive, you can get a notification, and then you can pull that down. A tip here is if you use Glacier directly, we stage your download-ready content for 24 hours because we put it on our staging location, so it's free for you. So for those of you who want to pull that content from the Glacier staging location to your on-premises location, we typically recommend customers to first of all measure how much download bandwidth you have, because you don't want to be in a situation where you downloaded, when you retrieved more data than you can download in a 24-hour window, right? So an alternative to that is you can retrieve more data than you can download, but copy that into an S3 bucket. Then you can have it there for as long as you need, and you'll be paying for that storage and the processing. So for those of you who already use Amazon S3, there's a very easy way to start with Glacier. This is called the lifecycle capability. With our recent launch of the infrequent access storage, there are actually 3 options you can tier. So you can, for example, like in this script, a very short script will allow you to archive logs in your S3 bucket that are 30 days or older into Glacier. You can do similar tiering into the infrequent access storage option as well, and then tier that into Glacier. So it's almost having a pretty simple, hierarchical storage manager that does tiering and automatic deletion for you if you choose to. Then we also have customers who have really established, backup mechanisms. Media customers have, very well sort of configured, established, asset managers that looks after their content in an enterprise setting. So these customers typically want to use Glacier in a more transparent way. They don't really want to write code. They just want to have, the same management interface that can look at their local storage as well as cloud storage in AWS. So Commvault is one great example. It's a very popular backup software that has native integration with both S3 and Glacier, and I think it just added integration with the infrequent access storage. So what that does is, for your traditional backup, regime, you can now tier some of the coldest assets into Glacier. We've worked with customers who typically would tape out or they will vault their coldest backups that they need to retain for years, typically like a full database backup they need to retain for several years. They can now push that into Glacier. And then they can still retain this management interface using Commvault or other tools that they choose to use. So just a little bit of a sort of like selection criteria. If you are looking for a third-party tool to start with Glacier, we typically look at from the lens of functionality and price. So to start with, we have consumers who back up their personal laptops. I do it myself. I use Cloudberry to back up my personal laptop into Glacier. The tool starts less than $50, and then it's also available on multiple platforms. There's Cloudberry Fast Glacier on Windows. There's Arc from Haystack Software on the Mac OS, and there are also a bunch of Linux tools. So lots of easy ways to get started. What these tools give you is a graphical interface that looks like you're just using Glacier as if it's a folder. Super simple and easy to get started. Then we have a number of small, medium customers. They would use Glacier through a entry-level NAS, for example, Synology, Veeam, or QNAP. Those are very popular products that we see customers use. Those typically start a couple $100s all the way to maybe $2,000 to $3,000. A lot of customers do this in a hub and spoke backup setup. They would have satellite offices, each deploy, for example, a Synology that has native integration into Glacier, and then they have the central hub that has a bigger NAS device that's able to make sense of all the content across all of the star offices in the cloud. Then, for those enterprise customers, they would typically have Tivoli backup software. They'll have some type of EMC backup software. Some of these customers would prefer using a enterprise-grade gateway for a couple of reasons. One is they want to compress the data before they send it to the cloud. They also want additional security so that this gateway can manage all of that seamlessly. So we work very closely with NetApp. Their latest product is called AltaVault. We have customers that basically do tape migration with the NetApp AltaVault into Glacier, and then continue to use, for example, their Tivoli storage manager on site that can manage Glacier transparently through the gateway. So lots of options there. Really depends on what you feel comfortable, what scale you're looking at. Typically, enterprise grade, we're looking at petabytes of data. I want to move in and talk about some of the best practices that customers have told us that's been helpful when they build an archive solution with Glacier. Number one is, before you archive, we recommend customers to take a look at your data and prepare it. A couple of things we see customers do is, first of all, because Glacier sends back an archive ID, and we actually throw away your file name, a lot of customers found that using the description field to be very helpful. So an archive has a 1024 byte description field, which you can use to populate any information you want. So a lot of customers use that to stuff in their file name, because we throw it away, they just stuff it in there. And then they can also just write some simple metadata in the description field. What that does is, when they lose their local index, they can just download a copy of the inventory, and the inventory is going to have that information. So then they can make sense of, hey, this archive ID actually maps to file 1, 2, and 3. So it's something we provide as part of the archive, so feel free to take advantage of it. We actually looked at, look at some customer applications. We asked them, how much do you actually use this description field? Some customers don't even know about it. So just something we would recommend for you to take a look. For very simple metadata field. And then customers also typically look at the number of files they want to store in Glacier, as well as their the file size. So Glacier is really meant to store larger files, if you will, because every archive, we also store a 32 kilobyte of associated metadata overhead. So with that in mind, what that really means is if you have lots of tiny files, like say lots of 1 kilobyte log files, you should do something to make it more cost-effective to using Glacier. So I have some examples here. Because of the 32 kilobyte overhead, if your archive size is 3.2 megabytes, then your overhead is 1% of your storage, which is pretty acceptable. However, if your archive is 1 kilobyte of data, then this 32 kilobyte of overhead becomes 97% of what you're paying for storage, which is not something we want you to do. So how do we deal with this? First of all is measure your file size, archive size. And then aggregation is really the way to go, right? A lot of customers compress a bunch of logs. They roll it into, say, hourly logs. They roll it into daily logs. Some roll it into hourly, daily, and then also partition by customers. I'm speaking on a couple of example best practices that ad tech customers told us. They aggregate pixel information, and then they do a partitioning on the customer ID. And when you aggregate, you want to think about what's the best thing I can achieve in terms of retrieving the data, right? You want this little sort of packaged data set to be self-contained and meaningful for your business. So if you're looking at hourly data, you probably want to package by the hour. If you want to look at daily data, maybe packaging by the day is going to be very helpful. I have a very interesting use case from media customers. So they generate raw captures. It's typically anywhere from 1 megabyte to 10 megabyte frames. 10 megabytes is getting pretty high resolution there. They also aggregate, not because they have like the small file challenge. What they do is they will stitch together, say 100 frames, each is 1 megabyte, and then they store this frame set as a little clip in Glacier as a single archive. And then when they pull this data back, they know exactly the byte range for the frames that they want to use. For example, if I want to pull back frame 5 to 15, I know I can index into a certain byte range. That's a capability that we provide. It's called a range retrieval. So for media customer, they can easily index into the frames and only retrieve that subset. What is required is that when you write this data together, you have to know a priori how I'm aligning those bytes. And once you do that, you can pull it back in the most optimal way. So after we prepare your content, then the next step is how do I optimize upload? So customers typically leverage, for a small set of data for a one-time upload, typically customers just use our single part upload, which is a single thread operation that uploads one file or one movie at a time. So some customers found that, hey, this isn't the best thing to do because I have a 100 gigabyte movie, and my internet connection is not the most stable, right? Be it on wireless or some non-commercial grade connection. So with the single thread upload approach, if your connection sort of like gets killed, then you lose all the work that you've done, right? So we want to do this in a more fault-tolerant way. So we support this API called Multipart upload, and customers really like that for either larger files or for those that have a less reliable internet connection. So how this works is it's very simple. We basically help customer chunk up their data. Let's say I have a 100 gigabyte movie file, I'm going to chunk it up into a number of 10 megabyte data chunks, and then I can start a parallel process that uploads each of those chunks simultaneously. If one of those chunks fail, it's no problem. I can just restart that, and by doing this parallelism, I can more often than not saturate the bandwidth that I have. It's much more optimal than using a single thread, and you have better fault tolerance. So for those of you uploading large amounts of data, we highly recommend the Multipart upload API. Then customers typically have to figure out what is the optimal part size. So what we have seen is anytime you do like a couple of megabytes, even all the way up to, I'll say 100 megabytes are pretty reasonable. Those are very common use cases that's tested, and some of our third-party enterprise gateways even use like a 100 megabyte part size, because typically enterprises will have commercial grade internet and all that. So that's the range I would recommend, anywhere from a few megabytes to up to 100 megabytes. Then we have customers who want to really optimize their data ingest beyond what they can do with the APIs that we provide. So we talk about using the internet, using single part, multi-part upload. For those enterprise customers that want to transfer petabytes of data into the cloud, into AWS for one-time tape migration, they will typically use Direct Connect. And then we're also very happy to we announced yesterday that we have a new offering to simplify transferring large amounts of data. It's called Snowball. It's a physical device that we ship to you, and you can basically load it up with data and then ship it back to us. Officially, we support Snowball transfer into your S3 buckets, but it's very easy to use that for Glacier because you can simply create a lifecycle policy, for example, a 0-day lifecycle policy that once the data lands from Snowball into your S3 bucket will automatically tier into Glacier. So the great thing about Snowball is there is no need to upgrade your internet connection. This is super relevant for customers who are trying to get out of their tape assets, their tape libraries, and shut down the data center. There's no reason for them to upgrade their network just so that they can transfer the data because they're going to shut it down. So I already talked to a bunch of customers today, media customers, in the US as well as in the UK, who are very interested in moving data to Glacier using Snowball. A couple customers are thinking about moving large data warehouses with Snowball and then archiving those into Glacier and storing them in S3. So highly recommend you to check it out. So Glacier is a low-cost storage. I'm sure a lot of you came here because we want to really drive down the cost of storage, and we want to help you with that. So there are a couple of things we help customers with in terms of cost management. Just want to highlight here. Over the last 2 years, we've had customers sort of share with us that occasionally, because they don't retrieve data very frequently, when they do, they kind of either make a mistake or unintentionally retrieved more data than they intended. Some customer told us, oh, we had a script that really did the wrong thing. It pulled back all the data instead of just 2% of what they needed. So, last year we launched this Glacier retrieval policies feature, which really gives you transparency in terms of managing your data retrieval. So a couple of things. Number one is with a single policy, it controls all of your Glacier retrieval activities in a single region. So for those of you that run, that has multiple business units all using Glacier, you can have a single policy that controls their retrieval activity across the board. And then you also find out whether this retrieval is going to be allowed or disallowed based on your policy. So let's take a look at how it works. It's very simple. You can configure this in the Glacier console. There are really 3 options. By default, we give customers this free tier only option because with Glacier you get 5% of free retrievals for your month, and most customers find that to be sufficient. So by default, you're not going to pay for any data retrieval, by accident. Then we have customers. So this is how you choose that. Just select it, save it, and you're done. Then we have customers who occasionally do have a business need to retrieve more data at a faster rate. For example, some ad tech customer says, hey, I have a billing dispute. I have to go pull back pixel and viewing logs for one customer who's disputing a charge for January, right? They need to pull back, say, 3% of the data. And then now, with the retrieval policy, I can set a budget. For example, I can say, hey, I'm not going to retrieve data faster than 1 gigabyte per hour, and that means you're guaranteed that you won't pay for more than $7.20 for that month. And last but not least, we give customers the option to just retrieve as much as you want. Sometimes it's helpful in disaster recovery situations, but most of the customers found the first two options to really give them assurance for predictable billing, especially to the enterprise customers in the house. So in addition to managing retrieval costs, we also want to give customers a better visibility into your Glacier spend. So a lot of customers tell us, hey, we have a finance department, we have a marketing department, we have a DevOps department. They all use Glacier, so how do I look at the allocation of costs and all that? So now you can do that with vault level tags. For example, you can easily set up a department / marketing tag, and then in your cost report, it will break out the Glacier usage by the department. And you can go complain to the marketing department you spend too much money on storage. So this is my favorite topic. A lot of customers talk to us about security and compliance, and we really believe this is a super important topic. And for data archival, this is extremely necessary to understand what are the security options you have on Glacier and how we can help you achieve those. I think a lot of you have this conversation either to convince your internal security officer, your auditor, or your compliance officer, or your IT department. So I really want to share some of the best practices that customers have shared with us. So first of all, a lot of customers found that audit trail, chain of custody logging is super important because, again, it's an archival system. A lot of customers use that for business critical compliance information and all that. They really want to understand who accessed what when, whether it was denied or approved, for what reason. So customers can do that by turning on AWS Cloud Trail with that Glacier is natively integrated to. And I want to highlight that we support all the operations, all the API access for Glacier. This includes the vault level operations, which was what we call control plane events. For example, creating a vault, deleting a vault, as well as data plane events, which is manipulation on individual archives. Another feature that customers found really useful is the vault access policy. So think about a situation where I have a vault for the marketing department. I want to give access to my two guys in the marketing team, but then a new guy joins the marketing team and he wants access as well, right? So customers really want an easy way to configure access for this vault for all the people. So now they can do that with vault access policy. There's a single location. You will configure, permissions. You can allow and deny, the individuals in your organization for access on that vault. And what is even more important is that you can now easily provide cross-account access to your business partners. So the last bit was very helpful because a lot of customers want to share data across organizations with their business partner. We have a lot of media customers who work with a number of partners in the lifecycle of their content creation process. Even after the content is archived, they sometimes still need to give a different studio, a different producer access to certain archives. So they found this to be extremely useful. Last year at re:Invent, I had several very interesting conversations with a number of financial services customers and healthcare customers. What they came to me is, hey, they are spending a lot of money with compliance storage, and they feel like Glacier at this low cost is suitable for compliance storage. But there's one piece missing, which is how do we really govern the controls and take away the administrator privileges? Because last year, the administrator for Glacier can do anything. They can delete data, they can revoke permissions, they can change the cross-account access that was provisioned in the access policy. So for the compliance customers, for the regulated industries such as financial services, healthcare, utilities, and government, they really want a tighter control in order to use Glacier for data archival. So a couple months ago, we launched a new capability called Glacier Vault Lock. It's really a framework to help customers devise your custom controls, compliance controls, on your vaults, and then be able to lock that down for a very strong governance position. So in terms of the type of controls you can deploy, financial customers were very vocal. They have a retention-based rule, which is SEC 17A-4 for broker-dealers. It was really a showstopper if we didn't have that for them. So financial customers can do that now. And then healthcare customers can also leverage this time-based retention to say, hey, all my patient records need to be retained for 30 years, all my pharmaceutical research reports need to be retained for the next 20 years. You can do that very easily. What I want to highlight is data retention is very important for compliance and regulatory customers, but vault lock gives you other possibilities as well. For example, we have customers that have highly secretive, classified information. What they want to do is enforce that any access, even to the permitted, the users, have to come through with a multi-factor, like a two-way multi-factor authentication. That is not a data retention as in protection for deletes, but this is something that they can easily configure with vault lock as well. In terms of the scope of this control, for those of you who use compliance storage products today, will know that most of the products give you a record level controls, as in you can say, hey, I'm gonna keep this, I'm gonna enforce that this particular file needs to be retained for the next 5 years and so. What we did was we gave customers a way to set a policy at the container level. We talked to a lot of customers, and they felt that this is gonna meet like more than 80% of their requirements. So the compliance controls you deploy will govern all the content in a vault, and any content that walks into that vault. Last but not least, this capability is called vault lock, so there's a locking mechanism. And this is really where we provide you a very strong governance position. With the lock policy, even the admin can no longer unlock the policy or delete the policy. This is how we took Glacier from immutable storage to really having the capability to meet compliance storage requirements. So just a little bit more about how to use vault lock. So customers can now deploy non-rewritable, non-erasable records with this new control code called archive agent days. This is a field where you can specify, retain all the documents in this vault for 6 years, and we will enforce that for you. Customers have also asked us, hey, how can we do legal holds? Because if you're in the compliance space, sometimes you'll get into a case, sometimes you get audited. So we also support legal hold with vault level tags. You can easily turn on or turn off legal hold with a tag that sits on the vault. And last but not least, for financial customers, there's a strong requirement to have a designated third party who can always have access to your data. This is a case where if a broker-dealer is in a lawsuit or they go out of business, to ensure that these records are still accessible, there's a designated third party. So we support all of these use cases with vault lock. So let's go through an example to see how this actually works. This is a very simple example, 1 year record retention. So what does 1 year record retention mean in the vault lock sense? So we do a little translation. This means that I'm going to deny delete archive operation from anybody, including the root or your administrator, your business partners, and yourself, when this archive agent days control code is less than or equal to 365 days. That's really it. That's really what a 1 year record retention means. So this is all you need to implement this 1 year retention. It's probably like 10 lines of code. As you can see, the effect here is deny, which means I'm going to block that operation. The operation in here is Glacier:delete archive. And then the resource is the container. This is my business critical vault that I want to deploy a retention policy on. And then the condition is the most interesting part. This is where the control code, the archive agent days come into play. This is where I say archive agent days is 365 days, and I use a numeric less than equal to comparison. So let me quickly talk about the locking process, because customer found that to be very, very interesting and useful. For those of you who are in the who have done database transactions and all that, this is a very simple concept. So what we want to do is, what customers wanted is, I want to test in a high fidelity mode as if this vault has been locked based on my compliance control. So we let you do that. So you can initiate a vault lock with a policy, for example, the 1 year retention policy. Once you initiate, the policy starts to take effect immediately. And you can test deletion, on that vault and make sure that you cannot do that. You can test deletion from your business partner and your administrator and all that, right? After you're done with the testing, if you're happy, then you can go ahead and lock it. But if you're not happy, you can call this abort vault lock command, and then we'll roll back the transaction. We'll roll back this vault lock policy for you. So you can repeat the first two steps as many times as you want, and we actually really encourage you to spend enough time testing your policy until you're fully satisfied, because when you lock it, there's no way to going back. This is how we can help you achieve compliance. So after you are happy with the policy, you will go ahead and lock it. And you'll have to pass in a lock ID, which you get during the initiate phase. It's a unique one. Only the most recent one can be used to lock your policy. And we do that so that we don't want any accidental locks when you haven't completed your testing. And after you lock the policy, it's immutable. That's how you get the strong governance. So I'll share another example. Financial customers are very interested in, which is the legal hold with the vault level tags. Again, the first step is you have to set up a legal hold tag. It's basically a key value pair on the vault. Typically recommend them to say, hey, the tag name is legal hold, and by default, I set the value to false. So by default, there's no legal hold on the storage container. And then in the situation where you do need to place a legal hold, all you have to do is flip on the switch. And again, we do this translation of a legal hold in the vault lock sense really means I'm going to deny delete archive operation from anybody as long as the legal hold tag is true. By the way, legal hold really means during this time, no one can delete any data, because any information in that container can or may be used to assist the investigation. That's the scope of the legal investigation. And typically, it can go for months or years. You just don't know, right? So when that happens, you have to basically lock out any deletion from the vault without any condition. So let's take a look at what that policy looks like. Everything is essentially the same up to the condition. The action, the action that's denied is the same. The vault is the same. And then the condition here just says legal hold tag is true. So when you want to turn on the legal hold, you just flip the tag value. And after you get out of that case, you turn it back to false. And then you can start operating under a normal mode. So we've launched this feature for a couple of months, and we have a lot of customer interest. And they shared a lot of interesting feedback or best practices with me, so I'd like to pass that on to you. So first of all, customer found it useful to map a single vault to a single retention window. So they will say, hey, I'm going to have a 5-year retention vault that I will lock and put all of my records that need that rule in that vault. Some customers said, okay, I'm going to go a little more granular. I'm going to create a 5-year vault for each one of my customers. Right? So that gives them more granularity. So we found that to be useful. Another thing we really can't emphasize enough is that for the regulatory use cases, we strongly recommend that you lock a vault, you test a vault and you lock the vault before you upload any production data. So for example, if I want to lock down data retention for 1 year, and I uploaded some documents to it, they've been there for 3 months, then I locked it for a year. What that means is those records are only going to be retained reliably for the next 9 months. It's not going to be the next 12 months because the archive agent days the clock already started ticking 3 months ago, right? So to avoid any air gap, what we recommend is lock the vault and then upload your production data. So the moment this record walks in, it'll be protected for the entire duration of your compliance objective. And the last bit is how do we use the vault lock policy in conjunction with vault access policy? These are very similar in terms of the policy, the nature of the policy. They're both implementations of the AWS Identity and Access Management language. What is different is they're designed for different goals. So on the left, customers found that using vault lock policy for only the most restrictive controls, such as compliance and regulatory governance, is a good way. For example, if I want to set up a business partner for the next, for data access for the next 1 week or couple of months, I do not want to put that in the vault lock policy because that is subject to change. Again, for financial customers, what they found is, hey, I have contracts with my designated third party. It might renew every year. It might be going on for the next couple of years. But I want to have that option. So what you would do is the designated third party is going to be configured in your vault access policy. You have more flexibility. The contract is over, I can switch it instead of locking yourself into that. So with these two policies working in parallel, customers can really get compliance, governance, and flexibility. So let me just quickly show you how easy it is to configure a compliance storage container on Glacier. And I tried to do that in less than 2 minutes. Let's see if I can pull that off. So this is the Glacier console. I'm going to show you how to lock down this demo vault for a 1-year retention. Let's go to the demo vault. There's a few tabs that shows the properties of the vault. And we look at this tab, which is called Vault Lock. You click on that. And it shows, hey, this demo vault is currently not locked. And then in order to lock it, you can click on this Create Vault Lock Policy. So we provide, in the console, we provide a UI that makes it really simple to configure these policies. You don't have to type it in and all that. So remember the 1-year retention policy? I'm going to choose Deny on the top, deny everybody. For my delete archive operation, then I'm going to go to the conditions field and say, I'm going to choose Glacier archive agent days for 365 days. You configure the top section, configure the bottom, and then you click on this add condition. We add a condition, and then you can get then we generate this policy for you, right? This is the exact same context, the policy body that I showed you in the previous slide. So with that policy in hand, you can now initiate a vault lock. This is the initiate transaction phase. You click on that button. What we pass back to you is a lock ID. It's a very long string. It's a unique string. And we tell you that you have 24 hours to lock the policy. This is something that we did on purpose because we want you to either commit this policy and be happy with it, or roll it back as soon as you find you're not happy with it. We do not want you to be in this limbo state because if you're in this intermediate state, the policy is actually working and you feel like I have deployed a compliance container, but in fact it's not locked, right? So that's why we want to make sure you either commit or roll back within 24 hours. And if you don't, we automatically roll back this policy so that you can start from step 1. So then you would make a copy of this lock ID, store it in somewhere safe. And then you go back to the console. Then we show, hey, this demo vault is now in progress in terms of the locking process. What you also see is in the bottom, there's the policy that is in flight. This is saying delete archive operation is being denied based on this archive agent days condition for the next 1 year. So you can choose delete vault lock if you want to revise the policy. But I'm going to just go to you're happy with your tests, and then I'm going to just complete this vault lock process. You click this button, and we require you to pass back the lock ID. We also purposely made it so that we don't display the lock ID to you. You actually cannot issue an API call to get that ID. We really want to make sure that when you lock, it's a very purposeful action. We don't want any mistakes. And it's really easy. Like losing lock ID is no big deal. You can always grab the policy, use an API call, and then go back and reinitiate. There's no loss of information there. So once you copy this lock ID into this field, and you complete the vault lock, and voila, your vault is locked. We show you what policy is locked, and then there's no going back after that. This is how we provide strong governance, and this is also the policy that you can show your auditor, because it's self-explanatory. I think I just exceeded 2 minutes, but that's how easy it is to configure a compliance storage container with Glacier Vault Lock. And I'm also happy to inform all those financial services customer in the house that We worked with Cohasset Associates, which is a very reputable third-party firm. They did an assessment on Glacier Vault Lock, and then they basically demonstrated that Glacier Vault Lock can be used to meet the data retention requirements that complies with SEC 17A-4 and the commodities trade regulatory rules. So financial customer, you have a new option compared to what you do today. You can do that. You can start archiving compliance storage in a matter of a couple of minutes of the Vault Lock process. So that's what I have today, and thank you for joining. I'm open to any questions.